What is up, everybody? Welcome into episode 7 of All Say This with Chris Castellani. I am your host, Chris Castellani. Really good show coming up for you. Got a lot of stuff to talk about to recap the weekend. Some good, some not so good. We're going to recap the Final Four, talk about what was a classic Duke, North Carolina game. Going to give you some Tigers news, both the good and the bad. Had some tragic news that I felt like we were going that way. Talked about it a little bit on Friday's show. Now we're going to talk about it here on Monday's show as well, now that it's officially confirmed. And I do want to end with a little bit of positive Pistons talk, some stuff that I watched over the weekend. But we're going to start with the Final Four. 2 games. Kansas ran away with their game against Villanova. Not a terrible game, though. I mean, it was not close necessarily, though Nova plays with a lot of heart, and they gave a little run there. I think they cut it to 6 at one point. Kansas, this is one of Bill Self's best teams. I mean, it's not saying much, right? I mean, they're in the national championship, so of course it's one of his best teams, but they're different than a lot of other Kansas teams, it seems. Like they're very efficient. They move the ball incredibly well. They're very selfless. A wonderful, wonderful team, and played great, especially in the first half against Nova. They were shooting the lights out of the ball. It was an entertaining game. Like, it wasn't a close game, but it was by no means a dud. Teams shot the ball well. Nova tried to make a little comeback there. I mean, they were without one of their better players, so it was an uphill battle from the beginning anyway. But that was the preliminaries, even though I think Kansas wins on Monday against UNC, and they will play the Tar Heels, like I just said, who beat their arch rival Duke in what was an amazing game. Top 10 college basketball game I've ever seen. Well played, clutch. I mean, you had guys who were heroes. You had some GOATs. It was really an amazing game. That is, I would say, the rivalry in sports with the most consistency in terms of competition. Coach K, I think, ends his career 50-50 against UNC. How crazy is that? How insane is that? That probably the greatest coach in the history of college basketball, at least to the modern age, put up a 500 record against his arch rival in 100 games. That is insanity. And this one was among the best. I watched this entire game, and I watched this entire tournament, and I heard a lot of people say, I guess the ACC was just undervalued, but how in the world was this UNC team an 8 seed? They have some absolute studs on that team. They got shooters, they got height, they got rebounders. That Crash Bandicoot guy, that dude eats glass. He's incredible. And this game was it was theater, beginning to end, back and forth, a game of runs. There was a moment where it felt like Duke was about to pull away, and then there was a moment in the second half where it felt like UNC was about to pull away, and finally near the end, Caleb Love with the three-pointer of his life to put UNC up 4 late, and they ultimately clinched it with some free throws. Awesome game. Just a great, great game. But it got me thinking, and I put a tweet out about this that picked up a lot of steam on both Michigan and Michigan State Twitter. What would happen if Michigan and Michigan State played each other in the Final Four? There was one year in which I thought it was not only going to happen in the Final Four, but given the way the brackets were set up, it was going to happen in the national championship. And that was 2014. Michigan State had a lead on UConn late in the second half, or halfway through the second half. In that game, they lost to Shabazz Napier. That year, that team would go on to win the whole thing. Michigan lost basically at the buzzer on a three-pointer against an 8-seeded Kentucky team. I think if both of those teams win those games, Michigan and Michigan State would have played in the national championship. And I was a senior in high school back then, and the idea of that kept me up at nights. Now, I'm all for the spirit of competition, and I've been open about the fact, hey, you know what? I want a championship. Everybody does, but there's something about the chase. There's something about being in it every year. There is one instance in which I will make an exception to that. I am 26 years old right now. I pray to God that at no point in my life Michigan and Michigan State play each other in the Final Four or national championship. And I know there's going to be people who are like, oh, come on, you're a pussy, man. You really don't want to see that? No, I don't. I understand that the buildup and the hype would be insane, but it'd be too much of a bloodbath. It'd be too much of a bloodbath on social media. It would either be, there's no other game I could think of that would be comparable to this. It would either be the highest high in the history of highs or the worst loss ever, and there's no in between. I don't care if they won by 2 or won by 20 or lost by 2 or lost by 20. It wouldn't matter. The pain would be so deep that it would be scarring essentially for life. It would be one of those I call them checkpoints in a rivalry, in which no matter what happens going forward, there will always be that moment where you could plant the stake in the ground and be like, remember this year, like UNC forever, from now until the end of time, will have that trump card. Guess what? I know you guys won it all in 91 and 92 and 2001 and 2010 and 2015, but guess what? we ended your coach's career as an 8 seed. They will always have that. There are certain things that happen in a rivalry that regardless of the past, regardless of the future, will always stick with you. It pains me to say it, but Michigan State football will always have a slight one-up on Michigan when it comes to greatest moments in the Michigan State football rivalry because of trouble with the snap. No matter what, no matter how often Michigan beats them, which over the last decade and a half has not been very often, but no matter how often they do, State fans can always go back to that game. They could go back to the minus 48 rush yards too if we're just talking dominant performances, but if we're just talking moments, they will always go back to that one. Like, is Auburn a better football program than Alabama? No, of course not. Alabama's a juggernaut, but they got the kick six. Probably the most iconic play in the history of college football, right? They'll always have that. I couldn't deal with the stress of a Michigan State Final Four game. And a lot of people could. A lot of people would enjoy it, but it would be one of those things that, regardless of the result, you would never forget. It's kind of like you come to a crossroads and you have two doors. And you can either just walk away and not worry about it, but somebody says, guess what? Behind one of these doors is your soulmate. It's the most beautiful woman you'll ever meet. You're going to get married. You're going to have a beautiful family, wife and kids. It's going to be awesome. Behind the other door is a chimpanzee that's going to rip your arms off. You know what? I'm not opening either one of those doors. I don't need the risk. That's what a Michigan State Final Four game would do. So I was thinking about it as that game ended and just how huge of a deal. Even if UNC loses to Kansas on Monday, like, it's one of those weird things where I don't think it would diminish this run, and I don't think it would diminish that moment. I think UNC is going to come to play on Monday night, obviously. Like, as good as Kansas is, UNC has played unbelievable throughout this tournament, except for the second half against Baylor when they blew a 25-point lead. They've been really efficient and really good, and they've been very well coached. Hubert Davis has done an excellent job in his first year, but they're always going to have that moment forever. That is one of those key moments in rivalry history in any sport. This is, to me, the last time we saw a rivalry moment like this was when the Red Sox came back to beat the Yankees after being down 3-0 in the 2004 ALCS. Now, what made that run amazing, outside of the fact, breaking the curse of the Bambino, was that kicked off what continues to be this insane stretch of success for the Boston Red Sox, who have gone on to win 3 more championships since then, and were in the ALCS last year as well, and they'll be competitive this year. Now, UNC, that's the great thing about the Duke-UNC rivalry. It's not like one side has ever been slumming it, right? UNC, in the last decade and a half, or a little bit over decade and a half, they won a championship in 05, 09, 2017. They were so close to winning another one in 2016, lost at the buzzer to Villanova. These are 2 of the top 5 programs in the history of college basketball, and they just played on the biggest stage in what was a game that absolutely lived up to the hype. And it got me thinking about Michigan State and how scared I would be if that ended up happening. Do I think it'll happen in my lifetime? I'm going to say no. I'm going to lean towards no. And I don't know how much time I got left. That could be 5 years. It could be 100 years. But I'm going to lean towards no. I just, because I feel like that opportunity was 2014. I don't know if it's ever going to line up better than it did in 2014. Maybe I'm just trying to save my sanity here, but I'm going to predict we will never see a Michigan State Final Four game or national championship game in basketball. Kind of a fun thing to think about, though. Want to talk a little Tigers news now, as a lot of news came out over the weekend regarding the 2 up-and-coming rookies. The one bit of tragic news, Riley Green broke part of his foot, a fractured foot. He will be out, it looks like, about 6 to 8 weeks, and then he'll probably spend a few more weeks in the minor leagues rehabbing until he gets called up. I had a bad feeling about this, and I'm a nervous Nelly as it is, but I kind of had a bad feeling already. Anytime a guy limps off with the trainer, that's not good. But what scared me is the fact that typically, from what I just recall in my life with players getting injured, when a guy goes in for an x-ray, if the x-rays come back negative right away, they say, hey, look, the x-rays came back negative. They're day-to-day. They'll be fine. The fact that AJ after the game was like, it's a foot injury, I don't have any more knowledge of it, makes me think that they were waiting to kind of get their ducks in a row before they made the official announcement. And then on Saturday morning, the official announcement came, Riley Green with a fractured part of his foot, and he's going to be out for a while. And it really, really stinks. Selfishly, for the fan base, it stinks because we want to see him. He looked so good in spring, and he seems like a guy who's ready to break out and have a really great rookie season. And guess what? He can still do all of those things. From what I'm hearing, this is not going to be some long-term lingering thing. He can be back to full strength, in several weeks, come back and be every bit as good as he was in spring. And if that's the case, then no problem. It sucks that we're not going to see him, but at least it's not some long-term lingering thing, because that would be the worst, especially for a player who's in such early stages of his career. It's devastating news. And Al Avila, in typical Al Avila fashion, was very open with the media on Saturday, saying, look, yeah, he was set to make the team. He was going to make the team. He was going to start in the outfield, and now Victor Reyes will be the guy, probably manning center field or left field. It depends on where they put Baddoo. It's brutally disappointing. It's disappointing for the fan base. It takes a little bit of air out of the excitement balloon for opening day on Friday that we're not going to see him in the lineup. I also think, to a certain extent, because of how big of a deal this injury is, some people are ignoring what could end up being a really big problem for this team out of the gate, which is they're already banged up. Riley Green is the most devastating of the bunch, but Derek Hill, who looked pretty darn good in spring, and I think probably would have ended up being this team's starting center fielder, is going to start the year on the IL. Andrew Chafin, who had a wonderful year last year with both the Cubs and the A's, who the Tigers just signed in free agency, he's going to start the year on the IL. Kyle Funkhauser, we've known for a while, is not going to be ready for opening day. And there's some other guys in the pen who have looked pretty shaky. Michael Fulmer's velocity is down. Now, it was down at this point last year as well. Found it when he started coming out of the pen, and I think, hit 99 or 100 at points a season ago. I'm not as worried about him, but it does thin the roster. Friday's show is going to be entirely about the Tigers. Unless there's some insane bit of news that breaks about one of the local teams, I'm going to be spending basically that entire show talking about baseball. So if you don't like baseball, don't watch Friday's show. Unless you want to learn something, have at it. But I had and have had for several months an idea of how many wins I think the Tigers are going to have. That prediction has changed over this most recent weekend with the players that are going to be out to start the season. They're going to have to weather the storm, and they're going to be thrown into the fire right away. The Chicago White Sox are the best team in the American League Central by a large margin. And even beyond that, they're going to see a really good lineup. And when you have a bullpen that's probably going to have some guys in it who don't have a lot of experience, it starts to scare you a little bit. In the opening month of this season, the Tigers are going to play the White Sox, Red Sox, Yankees, Twins, and Dodgers. Those are 5 teams that vary in quality, but at worst, they're competitive, and at best, they're World Series contenders. This does scare me. And it would be the most devastating thing, because last year you had a nice little story in the late in the season as the team. Not late in the season, the last 4 months they played good baseball. It would be such a kick in the scrotum if this team got off to like a 10-20 start and the air was let out of the balloon. It would really be awful. So they're going to have to try to find a way to weather the storm here. If there is one thing that provides me with optimism and hope, it is how they played last year. I know their record against divisional opponents was bad. I understand that, but there was a lot of games last year. In fact, I made a few videos where I was scratching my head saying, how in the world did that team that used those pitchers and had that lineup beat that team? There was a stretch, I remember it was in, I think, late August, early September, in which the Tigers played the Rays, the White Sox, and the Brewers. 3 first-place teams, 3 teams that, at the time, I was like, any one of these teams could win the World Series. And they went like 7-3 in a 10-game stretch, throwing out pitchers that were nobody, Drew Hutchinson and Jason Foley, guys that nobody had thought much of. Alex Lang, I think, picked up his first career save during that stretch. AJ is so competitive as a manager, and he's so smart as a manager that I think in these early games, my hope is that they find a way to do what they did at many points last year, which is let's just find a way to scrap out a win today. And if they can be around 500 by the time that they get healthy again, then we could be talking about a team that might fight for a playoff spot. But I can't lie to you. I am worried about this first month now because I don't think they're completely healthy. I don't think morale is an issue because I think that AJ's made it very clear after every game they throw it away and they start anew. They're not a team that's going to beat themselves up over injuries, but depth matters. I don't care how good your morale is. Talent beats out everything. And if this team is lacking in talent because of how unhealthy they are, it's going to create some serious issues. And that's assuming that guys like Jamer and Scope and Robbie Grossman repeat the success that they had a season ago. So there are a lot of question marks on this team. And I've been open about that from the beginning. But the one thing I hoped for was that they could at least stay healthy because they are a younger team. They're one of the younger teams in baseball. Typically, younger teams find a way to stay healthy. That will not be the case to start the 2022 season. So they're going to have to battle a little bit. In a nice little bit of good news, it was announced on Saturday that Spencer Torkelson has made the Tigers out of spring camp. I was pretty sure. I had it at about 55% believing he was going to make the team. I believe he's the best first baseman on the roster. I don't want to beat a dead horse too much because I talked about this in a video and I wrote a whole blog about it. It was an emotional announcement. I mean, it's in a very small way. It's like seeing your kids grow up. I mean, we were there when this guy got drafted, and we watched this team in 2019 lose 114 games, and we knew the prize we would get out of that was Spencer Torkelson, and now he's the Tigers' opening day first baseman. And I said in the video, I don't know how good the team is going to be. I don't know how good Spencer Torkelson is going to be. But I think one thing that is so great and so pure about baseball is that it's a sport of moments. Even in terrible seasons, great things can happen. The prime example, man, I mean, I'll go to this one forever. Spencer Turnbull's no-hitter. No-hitter, Spencer Turnbull! Good thing happened to the Tigers. Now, I think that moment kind of propelled this team into playing some good baseball for a solid period of time last season, but the reason why that moment connected with so many people, and I said it in my video, a good thing happened, was because it felt like for 4 years they were just in the doldrums. It's so rare that a team can go that long without anything positive happening. And I'm talking on the field. I'm not talking about number one draft picks. I mean on the field. Occasionally they'd hit a walk-off or something, but there was never anything to really be excited about, and then that moment happened. We're going to have moments like that this season. And one of them is going to be on Friday afternoon in what will probably be a cold, cloudy day in downtown Detroit, Michigan. Spencer Torkelson is going to make his Major League debut. And I'm guessing he'll probably bat 7th at this point, maybe 8th. And when they announce his name, that place is going to erupt. Standing ovation. And it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful moment. I'm going to have chills all over my body when it happens. And I think that's going to be a really cool thing to see. I'm sure it's going to be emotional for him. I'm happy for him. And the story, by the way, I think it was Evan Woodbury who tweeted it out, that Torkelson was called into Hinch's office and AJ was there and handed him the first base glove. I mean, how cool is that? Miguel Cabrera is, he's a goofball, right? But every player in that clubhouse, every hitter especially, looks up to him. And to have a future first ballot Hall of Famer, hand the torch over to you as a rookie, he's gonna remember that for the rest of his life. Regardless of how successful he's going to be at the major league level, and I do think he's going to be quite good, that is something that he's going to tell his grandkids about one day. Awesome. Very, very cool gesture by AJ and a really cool gesture by Miggy. So there was some good news that came out of this weekend, even though I'm watching spring training right now and Casey Mize is getting rocked in the first inning. He's given up 2 home runs already. But hey, it's spring. Just get us to opening day. A few days away. We're going to be all right. Last bit of news that I wanted to discuss is Detroit Pistons related. Last week on this show, I poured my heart and soul out there. I'm kidding, of course, as I talked about kind of where I stand with the Detroit Pistons and my fandom towards them and how it's waned. Now, the one thing that I made clear, because I know if the Pistons get good, I'm sure somebody will take that clip out of context and make it seem like I'm not rooting for them. I'm really rooting for them. It's just the heart won't be in it the way that it would be in it for Michigan sports or the way that it would be in it for the Tigers. But I find myself rooting for them, and I was watching them on Friday night, I believe it was, against the 76ers, and I think it was the most efficient Pistons performance I've seen in quite a long time. But just watching the team, the thing that has me excited finally is that I never had any doubts about Cade, and Cade Cunningham has come along, and he may very well be Rookie of the Year. I think he's second right now in odds. But the one thing that bothered me about this team so much throughout the season is that I saw it in Cade, but I kept hearing people say, "Oh man, they got a core coming together," and I saw Cade and nobody else. Like Jeremy Grant's good, but is he like a long-term piece? I don't know. Bagley, is he a long-term piece? I'm not sure. Somebody more knowledgeable than I can explain this to me at some point. But some of the other guys, Stewart and Hayes and Bay, I was watching like, I'm not really seeing it from these guys. And guess what? These last several weeks, when I've watched them, they've looked like different players. And now I am seeing a core. And I don't think any one of those guys outside of Cade is a star. But most basketball teams are not made up of stars. It's 1 or 2 stars and then a whole lot of role players. And I'm seeing some really good potential role players, some good number 3, number 4 options, and then you have what I believe is probably a budding superstar in Cade Cunningham. Now, one guy I'm very happy for, and this guy I wanted to focus in on. I'm really happy for Isaiah Livers. Isaiah Livers is probably one of my 5 favorite Michigan basketball players that I've ever watched. He's not one of the 5 best, but conducted himself perfectly. Everybody liked the guy. Had so many reasons to complain. I mean, he had a coaching change, and then the last 2 years of his career, he didn't play in the tournament, once because of COVID, the other time because of a broken foot. And just a wonderful, wonderful player. And the Pistons, I think, lucked out that he had the foot injury, because somebody else probably would have taken him in the first round, if not for that. Again, I go nuts about this all the time, with whether it's recruiting rankings or just how we assess guys in the draft, because I didn't see a whole lot of serious holes in Isaiah Livers' game. He was way more explosive than people let on. I mean, he could get to the rack, and he threw down some nasty dunks on people. That's obviously something he's probably not going to be able to do in the NBA, but he can create off the dribble. Great shooter, great 3-point shooter, and a phenomenal defender. Those guys in that last era of Michigan basketball, 17 through 21, kind of probably ending with the second year under Juwan. Those guys, every one of those guys in that program was really good on the defensive end. And I think that in a way they became undervalued because of that. And he started the other night, Livers did, and he scored 17 points. And this guy's never going to be a superstar, but I really think Isaiah Livers is going to play a key role on a playoff team one day. He's not going to go for 25 a night, but he's going to be one of those guys who's going to come off the bench and hit a huge shot for somebody, because he's a smart player, good basketball IQ, keeps his head down, great shooter. I'm really happy for him, and it's starting to, like I said, it makes me happy to see him doing better. It doesn't make me super excited, but it feels like, as I said last week, it feels like the wheels are finally starting to turn. They're finally starting to get out of this dreck, this mud that they've been in for 14, 15 years now. Well, last little thing here, and this is more of an epilogue than it is an actual segment. I didn't watch much of Michigan's spring football game. I know this is hypocritical coming from somebody who religiously watches spring training for baseball, but there's few things in the world that I think are as meaningless as spring football, especially at Michigan. I can't tell you how many April Heismans I've seen at Michigan from guys who looked great in the spring. Devin Gardner, Tate Forcier, Denard, these guys that were going to be big-time studs, who some turned out to be okay, but a lot of them didn't amount to much. You're playing against yourselves, and I don't take anything out of it. So I apologize if there were people who expected me to come on here and talk about spring football, but I'll talk about football when it's football season. And right now, it is not. It's baseball season. As I said earlier, Friday's show I'll be covering most baseball as a whole and making some predictions about who I think is going to make deep runs and make it to the World Series and win the World Series, but it will mainly be a Tigers-centric show, giving my rundown of how I feel about the team as a whole, predictions, where I think they'll end up in the AL Central standings. So that'll fill up the entire show on Friday, and that show will be up early, and I'm going to try to make things easier on producer Matt, because I'm going to be at Comerica on opening day. We're going to be doing a nice little a little vlog, a little documentary as we chronicle the goings-on around Comerica, when I'm going to be there with producer Matt, my buddy Anthony, and maybe somebody else too. I'm not sure. So yeah, that's kind of the plan for the week. The podcast, I keep getting asked this question. The podcast, this show is coming in podcast form. It will. We're going to work through it. Like I said, we're in episode 7, and by the time the podcast is up and episode 100 comes by, no, everyone's going to forget we're not in podcast form. But I promise you, it is in development. It is coming. These things take time. A lot of things at Barstool take time. It's not Barstool. It happens at every company. So I preach patience, and I appreciate all of you for continuing to show support, comment, subscribe, spreading the word. You guys mean a lot. That will do it for today's show. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. While you're at it, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. I will be right back here on Friday with a full-on Tigers preview, opening day preview. Can't wait for that. Should be a really fun show. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.